All right, let's dive into something really cool today, drum and bass. Whether you know it well or are just curious, I think we're going to uncover some pretty amazing stuff about this high-energy music.
Yeah.
We're using that article you sent as a jumping-off point, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect choice, because drum and bass, it's so much more than just like fast beats.
Right.
It's got a deep history, a whole global scene around it, and it's influenced a ton of other music you probably hear all the time without realizing it. So today, let's try to get into not just the sound, but like why it matters, musically and culturally.
I am so ready for this. Okay, so our journey starts in the UK,
Yeah.
early 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
Like emerging from those rave and jungle scenes that were so huge.
Yeah.
But here's what blows my mind. It wasn't just a direct evolution, right? Drum and bass, it pulls in all these other elements. Reggae, hip-hop, even breakbeat. It's a crazy mix.
Oh, it totally is. And it makes sense when you think about how multicultural the UK was back then. Each genre brought its own unique flavor. Like, think about reggae, that deep bass you feel in your chest. That's a huge part of drum and bass, too. Then hip-hop, with its signature breakbeats, those are like short drum patterns, almost like building blocks for so many genres. And breakbeat culture itself was all about pushing limits, experimenting, which totally rubbed off on drum and bass.
So you got this incredible mix of influences all coming together, but then there's the speed.
Right.
We're talking 160 to 180 beats per minute. That's like your heart rate during an intense workout. Those super fast break beats, that's a huge part of what gives drum and bass its energy.
Absolutely. It's the energy, but it's not just speed, right?
Yeah.
It's the way those break beats are chopped up, layered, rearranged. That's what makes it so unique. They're often syncopated, which basically means the emphasis is on the offbeat. So it creates this feeling of anticipation, surprise that keeps you hooked. And then, of course, the bass.
Oh, yeah, that bass.
It's not just loud, it's deep, it resonates, it's meant to hit you right in the core.
You keep mentioning break beats, and I got to admit, I'm not totally clear on what those are. Could you break it down for me and maybe for some of our listeners who might be wondering the same thing?
Sure. So imagine a drummer playing this killer drum pattern. Now, take a tiny piece of that, maybe a couple of seconds long, and loop it over and over. That's the basic idea of a breakbeat. In drum and bass, producers take those breakbeats and get really creative, chopping them up, adding effects, layering them to create these complex rhythms. They're like the foundation of the whole sound.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So it's like taking a little snippet of a drum solo and turning it into this driving force for the whole track. And on top of those break beats, those bass lines, I've heard people talk about all these different sounds, textures in drum and bass. What's going on there?
Yeah. Think of the break beats and bass lines like the skeleton of the track, and then the producers get to flesh it out with all these sonic details, swirling synths, these atmospheric pads, sampled vocals, even sounds from everyday life can get woven in. It creates this rich, immersive sound that can be like hypnotic, but also exhilarating.
Like they're painting with sound, right? Creating the whole sonic landscapes.
Yeah.
But when I think of electronic music, I often picture like DJs hunched over laptops, tweaking knobs. But with drum and bass, I get the sense it's more like wielding these sonic weapons, this wall of sound that just hits you.
I think that's a pretty accurate way to describe the energy, for sure. It's meant to be immersive, to really make you feel the music. And that sound has evolved in so many directions. You've got subgenres like liquid funk, which is all smooth and melodic, almost like a soundtrack for chilling in space,
Yeah.
And then you have neurofunk, which is dark, complex, intense, like a sonic representation of a futuristic city.
Wait, subgenres. So it's not just one giant sound. There are all these different flavors within drum and bass. This is even more interesting than I thought.
Absolutely. Think of it like pizza. You've got the basic crust, that core drum and bass sound, but then you add different toppings for variety. Liquid funk, neurofunk. There's also jump up, which is known for its high energy party vibes.
Okay.
And then there's dark step. That one takes you on a journey to the darker, more experimental side.
Wow. It's like choose your own adventure for your ears. So many paths to explore. It's wild how it can be so diverse but still feel unified. Okay, so we've talked origins, different flavors, but I'm curious about the people at the beginning, the pioneers who shaped this music. What comes to mind when you think about early drum and bass?
Oh man, it's impossible to talk about early drum and bass without mentioning Goldie's inner city life. That track is just a masterpiece. It captures the spirit of the 90s scene perfectly. Breakbeats, atmosphere, soulful vocals. It was groundbreaking, a true anthem. And Goldie, along with artists like Roni Size, Groove Writer, Fabio, they were key in pushing drum and bass forward, experimenting with sounds, building a community.
I can picture it, like those DJs spinning in dark, sweaty clubs, the energy building, the crowd just lost in the rhythm. Must have been electric. But those were the early days, right? How did drum and bass evolve from those underground scenes to what it is today?
That is the AC question. It leads us to the next chapter of our deep dive. So let's shift gears and explore how this genre continued to grow, innovate, and reach a wider audience. As drum and bass started taking off, it attracted this new wave of artists who brought their own perspectives and influences. In the early 2000s, you had groups like Pendulum, Subfocus, High Contrast. They kind of added a whole new dimension to the sound, bringing in more melodic elements, sometimes even like rock influences. And their tracks started getting played on, mainstream radio. It's a great example of how a genre can evolve but still stay true to its core.
It's like they took that classic intensity, that drum and bass energy, and kind of gave it a little bit of pop appeal, opened it up to a much bigger audience.
Speaking of reaching a wider audience, I've noticed how drum and bass elements seem to pop up in other genres too.
Oh, yeah.
Like you hear it in dubstep, trap, even some of that more experimental electronic music. You're right on. It's wild how those fast, syncopated rhythms and deep bass have kind of seeped into so many different styles. Like you've got that Dutch trio, Noisia, known for their mind-bending dubstep. They often weave those drum and bass elements right into their productions. And then you have someone like Flying Lotus, who's got that experimental, jazzy sound. Even he's used those chopped up break beats to create something truly unique.
It's like drum and bass became this secret ingredient that artists from all these genres are using to spice things up. I love that idea of cross-pollination, how music constantly influences and reshapes itself. But it's not just about the sound itself, right? There's this whole culture around drum and bass, a feeling you just don't get unless you experience it firsthand.
Totally. You hit the nail on the head there. Drum and bass is deeply tied to rave culture. Picture a huge warehouse packed with people, all moving as one to these pounding beats. The sound systems are meant to engulf you in the music, and the DJs, the MCs, they're like guides taking you on a sonic journey. It's not just a party, it's a shared experience, the sense of community, this raw energy.
I've seen videos of those events, and the energy is unreal. You can almost feel the bass vibrating through the screen. You said DJs and MCs act as guides. I'm curious about their role in a drum and bass set.
Oh, they're vital. The DJ is like the conductor, right? Selecting and mixing the tracks, building that momentum, creating a flow that keeps everyone moving. A good DJ can read the room, knowing when to drop a high-energy banger, when to switch things up with something more atmospheric. And the MC, well, they're like the hype person, the storyteller, the one who interacts directly with the crowd.
So they keep the energy up, make sure everyone's feeling the vibe. I'm starting to understand how it all comes together, this symphony of sound and energy, with the DJ, the MC, and the crowd all playing their parts. You mentioned this being a global phenomenon. It's not just limited to those UK clubs anymore, right?
Not at all. Drum and bass has spread its wings and flown to every corner of the world. You've got massive festivals in Europe, underground clubs in Japan, passionate drum and bass fans everywhere. The internet has played a huge role in that, connecting artists and fans across cultures.
Yeah. It's incredible to think how something that started in relatively small underground scenes became this international movement. But even with all the growth and evolution, it seems like drum and bass has kept its unique identity. What do you think is the secret to its staying power?
I think a few things. First, there's this constant drive to innovate and evolve. Drum and bass artists aren't afraid to experiment, push boundaries, incorporate new sounds and technologies, always finding ways to keep things fresh.
Like musical explorers, constantly charting new territories. And I bet technology has played a huge role in that evolution.
Oh, absolutely. Production software has become so advanced. Artists can create these crazy, detailed, and layered tracks, manipulating sounds in ways that were unimaginable a few years ago. It's like having a whole orchestra at your fingertips.
That must be so empowering. But I imagine it's also a balancing act.
Yeah.
Using all this amazing technology without losing that raw human element that makes drum and bass so special.
You nailed it. It's a constant conversation in the scene. That balance between innovation and authenticity. Some artists are all about the tech, pushing boundaries, creating these hyper-polished, futuristic sounds. Others are more focused on preserving that raw, almost punk energy from the early days.
So there's room for everyone under the drum and bass umbrella. from tech wizards to old school purists. And that makes me think, when we talk about that human element, we can't forget the DJs and MCs, the ones who bring it to life in clubs and festivals.
Absolutely. They're the ones translating those studio creations into a live experience. A great DJ can take you on an emotional roller coaster, building tension, releasing it, creating these moments of pure euphoria. And the MCs, with their lyrical skills, their connection with the crowd, add a whole other layer of energy and excitement.
It's a true collaboration, a symbiotic relationship between the artist, the music, the audience. And that energy, that shared experience, that's what sets drum and bass apart.
Exactly. It's about more than just listening. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself. Letting go, losing yourself in the rhythm, connecting with others who share that passion. And it's interesting. For all its energy and intensity, drum and bass can be surprisingly emotional too.
That's true. Some tracks have this melancholic, almost introspective quality. It's like they're tapping into something deeper beyond the surface.
It's a beautiful paradox, right? This music meant to make you move, get your heart racing, but at the same time, it evokes all these emotions: euphoria, sadness, nostalgia, even a sense of awe.
Like it's speaking to something primal, something in our shared human experience. Which brings us to a question I bet a lot of our listeners are wondering. How do you even begin to explore this massive world of drum and bass?
Great question, and one we'll tackle in our final segment. We've covered a lot of ground: the history, the evolution, the cultural impact, the future. Now, let's focus on giving some guidance for those ready to embark on their own sonic adventures.
Okay, so say someone's hearing all this for the first time and they're thinking, wow, drum and bass sounds amazing. Where do I even start? What would you recommend?
The cool thing about drum and bass is there really is something for everyone. Like, if you want that classic 90s sound,
Yeah.
I'd say check out Goldie's Timeless album.
Okay.
It's a true classic. Or explore anything by Roni Size and Represent. They were pioneers blending jazz and drum bass.
Awesome. So those are great starting points, but what if someone's leaning more towards that melodic, atmospheric side we talked about?
Oh, then definitely dive into artists like Caliber and Netsky, Hybrid Minds. They're known for those beautiful melodies, intricate production, those lush soundscapes, almost cinematic. Like, think about Caliber's Second Sun. It's like a ray of sunshine, pure warmth and emotion.
I'm getting inspired to build a whole drum and bass playlist, for different moods. But beyond just tracks, is there a way to experience the live drum and bass vibe for those of us who haven't been to a rave or a festival yet?
Oh, for sure. There are tons of amazing live sets online. You can find recordings from legendary clubs, festivals, even check out live streams from DJs and MCs performing from home or studios these days. It's a great way to see how they interact with the crowd, build the energy, create that atmosphere.
It's like a virtual taste of the real deal.
Yeah.
As we've been talking about all this, it's really hit me. Drum and bass, it's more than just a genre.
Yeah.
It's a movement, a community, almost a way of life. It brings people together from all over, united by this intense, intricate, and deeply emotional music.
Exactly. That's what makes it so special. This constant creativity, innovation, connection. And even with all the growth, it's held on to that sense of community, shared passion that's been there from the start.
Like a musical family, everyone's welcome to join the party. So for our listener out there who might be feeling inspired to dive into drum and bass, what's one piece of advice you'd give?
I'd say don't overthink it. Just dive in. Explore different artists, subgenres, eras. Listen with an open mind and let the music take over. You might be surprised by what you find.
I love that. Embrace the journey, let the music guide you, find your own rhythm in this world of sound. Who knows, maybe we'll all meet on a dance floor someday, united by the power of drum and bass.
That would be amazing. Until then, keep exploring, keep the beat alive.
And that brings us to the end of our drum and bass deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring this genre with us. We encourage you to continue your own exploration. There's a whole world of sound waiting to be discovered.
Until next time, stay curious, stay open-minded, and keep those beats rolling.